Our next keynote speaker is Professor Anna Moore, Director of the ANU Institute of Space, who will speak on leadership insights from outer space. Professor Moore works at the forefront of Australia's renaissance in space exploration. I swear this was written so that it's got lots of trip over words in it, and is a major force driving Australia's strategic direction and R&D translation agenda to build national space capabilities and industry. As an astronomer by training and globally recognised leader in astronomical instrumentation, she found and directs the Multidisciplinary Institute for Space in Space at the Australian National University. Through Professor Moore's strategic leadership, ANU is now internationally recognised as a thought leader and solution provider for some of the most pressing challenges on the planet, directing her team's work in space, situational awareness, quantum communications, space-based Earth observation and climate adaptability, and space governance. Professor Moore was instrumental in the formation of the Australian Space Agency in 2018 as part of the Australian Government's Expert Reference Group, and continues to play a key role in building major alliances with partner space agencies and industry leaders across the US, Europe and Asia. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Anna Moore.
Well, it's wonderful to be here with all of you. So I'm, I won't go through my bio again. That was a very long bio. Sorry. Yes, I'm Anna Moore. I'm the VC's Vice Chancellor's Entrepreneurial Professor at ANU. And in that role, I run a fantastic multidisciplinary institute. I'm not even doing anything. It's telepathy. Look at that. That's amazing. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Who's doing the slides? I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So I was asked to come today just to share some of my journey with you, and I really wanted to start with just a little bit about my story. It always seems a little bit strange talking about yourself. But I think each of us have a very unique journey. No two journeys are the same. And I couldn't have said where I was going to be or what I was going to do at the start of my journey. So I wanted just to share a little bit about that with you. And I'd love to hear about some of your experiences maybe in the break when we hear the last of the morning sessions. So I'm from Sunderland in the northeast of England. That's where I was born and raised. It's a very traditional area, quite a poor working class area, and single parent. My mum had me when she was 16. And even though we struggled quite a bit economically, as it were, it was really important to have that protective network, you're at least one person who was really on your side fighting from day one. And I was very fortunate to have that. I was the first in my family to go to university. At the time, when you're a kid, you don't really think any of this is really important. You just kind of go to school, do your exams, and hey, But I think looking back, that was probably a very big deal. No one had gone to university. Very few had gotten GCSEs or A-levels, the British system. So I made it to Cambridge to study physics, which was fantastic, and a real achievement for me, a personal achievement for me. And I realized then I loved the sciences, and I really loved building things, though, more than the physics itself. I love to make stuff and design stuff and invent stuff. And that's what I really wanted to do. And so after Cambridge, I went to London to do a master's of satellite communications. There wasn't any space happening then in the UK, but I was just really excited about it and had no idea what it was and thought, this is awesome. I've got to learn about it, rockets and stuff. So I went to London and got a master's in that. And then I was fortunate to get a scholarship to come to the University of Sydney to do a PhD. And that started my journey with with Australia and my life in Australia, and I'm Australian now. But that was the start of that journey. I built a telescope that was in Narrabri. If anyone's from Narrabri, I love Narrabri. It's fantastic. Spent many months there. Wonderful community of people. So I built a telescope there. And I'd say that was about the first time I remember thinking when I went to my first conference and seeing that I was at a conference of about 2,500 people. There were 5 women. I kid you not, 5 women. And the two things there, one is a frightening statistic, but the second thing was that I hadn't even realized that until going to something like that. It was only when it was made so visible, that I was like shocked at how unequal the system was. Of course, this is a gender-specific talk, but you could apply that to many other areas of diversity, including socioeconomic. So I wanted just to say that. But after then, I went to Caltech via Florence, which was lovely. I went to Caltech, where I spent 12 years as a instrument designer for telescopes and instruments. But it was when I did a lot of project management. So I was super excited to come and talk here today, because I can talk more about project management than what I normally do. And that was a really wonderful experience, and I learned a lot. Then I was headhunted by Brian Schmidt and others to come back to Australia to run as a director the AITC, the Advanced Instrumentation and Technology Centre, which is here right in Canberra on Mount Stromlo, a world-class facility, if I say so myself. But it really is. And that was my first opportunity to run a large group, to have the ability to make those leadership decisions and steer a whole sort of a narrative rather than being someone who worked from underneath. And that was fabulous. So I will stop there. And as I said, I couldn't not put these slides up as I'm talking to a whole room of project managers. So my area of project management was designing and delivering very large-scale technical instruments for telescopes as big as this. So on the top is a series of 30-meter plus class telescope sizes. This slide was edited by my kids for a youth forum. That's just, by the way, just the bubbles in there were their additions. But these are major international projects, ground-based facilities, where you need that aperture, that size of telescope to get the really ultra-sharp images at the edge of the universe. What I worked on was more the instrumentation side. Let's see if I can get this one up. Thank you. That's just a little subset picture there of one of those instruments. It's a bit like the retina of your eye. The telescope is the lens in the front. What's at the back is that detector and the image processing part of how we see. And so I worked on the big versions of those for very, very large telescopes. And so you can imagine these are they're very complex instruments working at micron level of precision, cryogenic instruments. So masses and masses of systems engineering and huge teams across multiple continents. That was the scale of what we were doing. So fabulous experience. But then something happened I wasn't expecting. In 2017, I would have done the job I just talked about forever, past retirement. I've always taken jobs I would do forever and loved it. But then something happened that I wasn't expecting. And I was invited to be a member of something called the Expert Reference Group in the federal government in 2017 to assess Australia's space industry capability, what we have, what we should be doing, what are our benefits as a community from this word space. It's not astronomy, this word space. Which is a really fantastic opportunity. If anyone ever gets the opportunity to be on a board or a panel or an advisory board, especially in government, it's a really fascinating process to be part of, and it teaches you a lot, I think, about how to get big initiatives across the line. Out of this came the formation of the space industry. But the reason I'm saying this today is because it also gave me insight about what my university should be doing to grow Australia's space capability and how should it be doing it. Because I read there were 32 submissions as part of the process, which all came from different areas within my institution, of which no one talked to anyone else. So no one was talking. It was clearly a siloed problem. Amazing things, but no one knew anyone else. And no one saw the intersections, what was possible in between the disciplines. And that became very apparent to me. And that was where the value was. That was where the value was. So I wasn't expecting it, very happy what I was doing. But I realized that there was a calling that I should be doing something else, something bigger, which was to bring all of ANU to the table to make sure that we're supporting our nation so it can benefit from this new space opportunity. And then I was told that was impossible. I was told, it's a great idea, Anna. Obviously, great idea, but this is impossible. You want to cut across the whole university. We'd love to do that. We've tried 1,000 times, but no one's made it. No one's been able to do it. And so that's when you deep breath. And I said, okay, the value's here. Give me 6 months. I'll put a plan together, and when we'll go from there. How does that feel? And you get a lot of. It's my favorite one. I don't know. But I was like, that's okay. But we'll just give it a go. In 2 months, we already moved from the idea to the voice, shall we say. So these are, and it was a grassroots approach, really. But in 2 months, I already had 15 different schools. Hands up, where we really want to, we don't know where we're going. We don't know where you're going. Space is new. But I want to be part of this, and I have something to offer, and there's something that I want to gain here too. So this is just, it definitely is all about people when you're starting something new. And I let the people do the convincing. So this community was formed straight away. And that was about 5 years ago. I'm going to go to today. And just to say that things have gone very well, and this approach. And I'll go into why in a minute. But this is our core team at the end of last year. I'm not on this picture. They're receiving the Claire Burton Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Award from the Vice Chancellor of ANU as part of the 2024 awards. We also received the Distinguished Service Award from the university for advances, not just in multidisciplinary approaches, but for demonstrating the value of a diverse group of voices at being able to change the paradigm in a bureaucracy that is struggling, if that sort of makes sense. We really lifted the game. Not just money, and that's important to managers, but yes, it was that too. And just very recently, we also received an award from the UK called the Jackson Gwilt Medal, which was our first sort of international award, celebrating the practices of what we implemented via this center, via this institute. So that's where we are. But I wanted to just give maybe a few insights as to why this worked. Just being mindful of time. Do I have 20 minutes or 30 minutes? I'm sorry, excuse me. What is that? Is that? Whoa, okay. Well, I wanted to leave time for questions too, if that's okay for everyone. Okay, so the first the reason why this worked is that it was a solution that was needed. So space is something that I think for the Australian public is still quite a distant word. I think the public is starting to understand why it's important for things like navigation, GPS, telecommunications, remote area connection, climate, disaster response. I think this week, and I send my thoughts in regards to fellow Queenslanders in this terrible situation, but the fast response for something like that and prediction is provided pretty much purely by space assets being able to observe and provide that data. It's used for our national security. It's used for disaster response. It's used for banking. It's integrally linked to banking, the financial sector. You just don't see it. You don't notice it when you make a transaction, but it's integrally linked to that. So space, when we say space, it's really an environment that we drive impact from, we drive societal benefits from. And so it's not just astronomy, it's not just a technology, okay? It's about the humanities, it's about governance, it's about regulatory. The beneficiaries are often people who don't think they're part of the space sector. They're doctors and, data centers on the ground or traffic and infrastructure, smart cities. They're the real beneficiaries of space data. So without them in the room, you can't really make good decisions. So that's why when I proposed, I knew I needed a multidisciplinary across all of ANU approach to make the right decisions about what to invest in, to get around a echo chamber approach. That makes sense. And that's because space itself is not disciplinary. So that was the first thing. It was acknowledging that the problem I needed to solve needed a broad set of voices. And I think that's why it was adopted so quickly, because unfortunately the moral decision is that everyone should be given a fair shot. That goes away when someone's under stress, I've noticed, unfortunately. Okay, so when there's another, I'm not sure if that's true, that's just my take on life. But when you talk about value, when you talk about the value of the multiple voices, not just disciplinary, that cuts across because no one will argue with value. So that's why it works so quickly, I think, for ANU. And when I started talking about bigger projects and bigger money and this kind of thing, that really did resonate, at least with the financial people. And that's important. So coming to the financial part of it, I wanted to present this just to give, I think, all of you perhaps an insight over to what is happening economically with space. So it's 5 years ago, space looked even then very different to what it is now. And you say, why? Well, it's really that access issue, that access problem in the past. So space was, the word space, the business of space, even 10 years ago, yes, it was visionary. Yes, it was this. Yes, it was the adopted by Hollywood, who made a lot of money out of it. But really, to us, to individuals, it was like, it's a long way away. What is it? How can I? It doesn't affect my daily life. But with the reduction in launch costs that happened over the last 10 years, it's meant that we've moved from government-only, nation-only projects to anyone. Any small businesses, individuals can now access space in a way they weren't able to do before. And that means the business case changes. Business cases and opportunities that space can accelerate all of a sudden become VC funded. That's possible. And that's what's happened the last 5 years. And so our economy, I had to change this slide because even 2 years ago, the global space economy was, I'm sorry to talk about money, but it does drive the world in many ways. Okay, so it was about 224 billion. It's more than doubled in 2 years. And the projections are just for it to keep doubling every few years at this point in time. So it's really important for Australia and Australians to understand what the opportunities are here to bring. And as I'm talking to project managers, this is a completely selfish plug from the space sector. Good project management is critical in space when you're talking about upstream solutions, because you can't fix it. You really need excellent project managers who can cross disciplines, who can, think holistically, probably work internationally as well, because you don't really get a second shot at this game. So yes, just FYI. So anyone who's interested. Yes. And lastly, why did the multidisciplinary holistic center institute model work? Well, it worked because I said a little bit about this already, but the picture on the left there is old space. So Earth's in the middle, all our assets, which weren't that many, were all in what's called a geostationary belt, which essentially means something is a long way away, but it means its speed is the same as the rotation of the Earth. So it's always looking at you. These are very expensive satellites, but that was the old way of doing space. So these things were a long way away, big satellites, usually communications or navigation, sometimes science as well. But that was the old space. That was space for the last 70 years. The top right-hand image there is showing every piece of space object or debris above 10 centimeters as of a couple of years ago. And you can start to see there's that ring. Do you see that sort of like blue ring around the Earth? That's the new economy. That's low Earth orbit. It's getting full of bits and junk and debris and everything else. So you can see there's and that's an immediate worry, because as soon as these things are going at 8 kilometers a second, when they hit each other, they don't just disintegrate. I mean, they don't just crash, they disintegrate. And you get accelerating problems. So that little precious sort of shell of the Earth is already becoming full of junk. And so I know that sounds a bit depressing, but we've been here before, haven't we? But that's why it's important in our institute and our approach that we have the ability to go, well, just because you can do something doesn't mean to say you should. Who is on this side going, this is important for Australia, for Australians, and for us, rather than just doing it because you can. So it's that wonderful balancing sort of ability that a multidisciplinary, multi-voice institute has compared to one that's very narrow. Oops. Sorry. I'm good. And so just wanted to share some themes that we have for the next 5 years as an institute that I would not be able to talk about if I hadn't had done this institute. If I'd stayed doing astronomy, I wouldn't be able to be at this level of impact, if that makes sense. So we have 5 themes. The first is about how do we use space to not just respond to climate disasters, but how can we get into a position where we can get ahead of the curve to prevent them? And our first initiative is focused on bushfires. It's focused on, there's a very clever way at ANU, a group there that is understanding something called a fuel load, which is one of the important parameters that you need to have to know whether something's going to turn into a major bushfire or not, essentially. And that parameter you can learn very early. So the question is, if we were to work with infrastructure and land management groups, etc., water management, and we could give you 3 months head notice of where the hotspots are going to be, how can we drive a different ecosystem response? So that's what that one's about. The second one, this is going to sound really out there, but it's quite real. So the second one, which is the top middle, is about how do we provide a net zero approach to what's happening in AI and in data processing right now, and how do we do that with a natural sort of security wrapped around it that currently we don't have. So we're working, and we should be pushing the boundaries of a university. So we're working on optical data centers, which get their own power from space. They naturally use lasers. They use lasers to communicate. I kid you not, I'm not making this up. They use lasers to communicate. And by doing that, it naturally protects your data. You could use the laws of physics to encrypt data using lasers that you cannot do with radio. And so this sounds nuts right now. In 10 years' time, this will be all over the place. Not all over. We'll be using this in 10 years' time. Space sustainability, that was an obvious one. How do we make sure that we're not making the environment any worse than what it is, but still using space to help us on the ground? So this is very much a space governance regulation piece and a technology piece, working together hand in hand to make sure that we are not making the situation any worse. Bottom left, growing a return and launch economy. I don't know has anyone recently seen, I know there's a lot of news coming at us from the US, but which is hard to move away from, but did anyone see last week a return to Australia from a company called VADA? This is a company that's from the US, but it's teamed with the Australian ecosystem to use Australia's benefits, natural benefits in return from space. And this particular return, physical return, was a medical pharmaceutical. And this drug is an anti-vaccine drug for HIV, which is you're able to make it in a much more pure form in space with microgravity, without gravity, than you can on the ground. And it means that for anyone who needs to have this treatment, they're able to do it at home rather than have to go into hospital to have an IV drip, because it's a very weak solution, if that makes sense. So you can start to see, yes, this is where the trades come in, right? Like you've got something like this that's possible for Australia to do. Let's make sure we don't damage the environment at the same time. So these are the things that are being talked about now, that they're being done. And so how do we position Australia with its amazing medical R&D sector to benefit from this capability? And lastly, data equity from space. So we think that space is for everyone. It's a global commons. We know it isn't. Certain people benefit from space compared to others, from the data we acquire from space. How do we broaden that to make sure that it's more equitable across regions, across groups and cultures than what we currently have? And this is my last slide. Yes, on time. I was asked recently what advice can you share from a leadership perspective for people who are at that transition where they want to be driving their own story? Because if you drive your own story, you can also do things that are new, that are bold, that other people tell you aren't possible, when they are possible. Okay, so I put these things up. These are the first 4 things that really came to mind. I'd love to hear your 4 things too, but for me, it's these ones. I think the first one was, people are everything when you're trying to do something bold and visionary. They have to believe in that vision too. They have to believe they're a part of it, and their voice is really important. I think it's hard to know how to say this without being so negative, but I have to say, in my life, I see an awful lot of leaders who are narcissists, who are just not the type of person you particularly want to be in a leadership position. I'm not sure whether that's just convention or it's linked to how we think hierarchical leaderships are. But I think for the challenges of our time today, thinking of having more empathetic, more at least sympathetic leadership, people who get people, it's really important. And if you want to drive really visionary things, that's what you need to have first and foremost. I encourage anyone in this room, who's obviously all of you, for being here in the first place. You need to be leaders, because if you're sympathetic and you get people and you want great team vibes, you're the ones that really are the future leadership. We need you there. Otherwise, you go around in circles and it's quite difficult. Right, okay. Build diverse teams. I think I've already said that, why that's really important. Diverse teams that fit the need of what you need to do. And use that as your value proposition when you're trying to get that over the line. Would be my advice. And I'm sorry it's not easier than that, because people should get it, but they don't. And I think when they don't, the value of what the team brings and how it looks and what individuals bring is really important. Everyone who looks the same cannot be resilient. It's not a resilient team. They'll get sideswiped by other things. They'll just miss it. So you really need to build diverse teams and listen to them. I have a very flat organizational structure deliberately. It matches my style of leadership, and I trust my team a lot. I expect a lot from them, but I also trust them. And I have to say, I've changed hiring principles too as I've gone along. We'll just have 3 people deciding a CV that comes in someone's half-hour interview. I've moved away from that as much as I can inside a university process, but I get much more input from my team. People tend to put their guard down when they're having a coffee conversation with your team compared to what they're like when they're in an interview. So just FYI. That's really, really helped build good teams quickly. The third is challenge the norms. Just because someone says it's not possible, we don't need to all be rude when someone says that, but if you think it's possible, that's all that matters. If you firmly believe in something, have the confidence to keep moving forward. It might not be at that particular moment, but find a way. It will work. If you really firmly believe in something, there will be a time that comes it's needed, or you'll find someone else who believes in that too. So do challenge the norms. Joint leadership as well, sharing leadership roles, I think is brilliant. I would love to do that. So just challenge norms of how things are done just because someone tells you, well, this is what we always do. Well, it's not working, is it? So maybe we should challenge it. I say this to my team and younger researchers as well. So take it for what it's, if it works. But something I wish I had been told when I started out was, because I just did things what I loved. And that's a fantastic way to approach life. When I had kids, though, I changed. I don't know why, but I did. I changed almost overnight. And I was much more sort of, okay, in 18 months, I'm going to do this. I'm going to achieve this. And I found that 5 years is too much. 6 months is too small. But 18 months is a good chunk of time to just plan where you want to be, okay? Or you want to be in a process or something you want to change, and carve it out backwards. So 18 months is a really nice length of time to get, whether it's a new role. A new role is big, but you can, 18 months is a good length of time to really get you on a career path. Saying you're going to be Queen of China in 10 years is probably not going to work, but you know what? If you chunked it up into 18 months, maybe you would actually get there. So it's a good length of time, So I'm going to finish there because my time's up. I'm very happy to take questions.
So MEACT is actually, we're all volunteers, and Prue is the CEO, and hasn't been in the job for very long, but I can assure you she is like doing what we're all doing here. And I wanted to come basically because I'm a bit old school in the days when there was no chance of going to uni, none whatsoever. You became a teacher or a nurse, and in the day, nursing wasn't taught in unis. And there's pros and cons there. And I know that my mum and her sisters would have been very capable of going to uni, but that again. So much has changed. And as far as Julia Gillard's speech is concerned, it also I just get goosebumps thinking about it. And I think you cannot say it didn't make a difference. You just cannot. So anyway, I could talk all day, but I've made some points about how I've changed because of the climate. At the moment, Cyclone Alfred is bearing down on Brisbane. Now, my daughter is a single mum. She gave birth, labour was 45 minutes. She was in the house on her own. The ambos turned up just in time to cut the cord. I'm so pleased she didn't call mum. That would have been the wrong decision. But having said that, it's interesting because in my day, I grew up in North Queensland. Cyclone Tracy went through that, and Althea and a couple of others. The generation in Brisbane, it's a flood. Don't worry about it. We'll be fine. Well, no, it's not. And that kind of, I guess, she'll be right. I saw by my daughter talking to me. So anyway, she was able to get herself ready, being a woman with a preemie baby on her own. She just put it all together and she was ready. So it's just like that. It's not that she's not listening to her male friends. She's doing this. And she said, Mum, I've got this. And she was dead right. One of the things I wanted to ask about is space junk. What are we doing about space junk? I mean, we're trying so hard to get on top of recycling and all that sort of jazz, and sometimes it feels like one step forward, two steps back. So when you put up the space junk thing, I knew I was going to stand up and ask you, are there any insights into what's going on? Because it's just when I saw that, I thought, what are we doing about it? And I guess that's really all I wanted to say. So MEACT is it's a government-supported not-for-profit. We're all we go into schools, and I also go to the AFP to try and seed in the audiences to reduce stigma. We go to grade 8. Just let that grade 8. And we have to warn them we're going to talk about physical, sexual abuse, suicide, but all of the people who are delivering this information have lived experience because kids will see straight through lies. So we're starting young, and I must admit, in the beginning when I started doing, thinking about being able to stand up in front of an audience of total strangers, example, that this is what you have to do. And I guess MEACT is also the kind of, has that safe space, but encourage, just at your own pace, but you can do this. So I'm really pleased to be here. I think we're very lucky, to be Australian. I mean, it's every day I wake up and I see things like, let's not talk about America, please. But the whole thing that we are lucky to be Australian, but in this generation, where I'm 65, but I see things are moving. Might be slowly, but we have come so far. So, yeah, I'm really just wanted to ask, my question was initially, until I wrote a page of points, what about space junk? And that's all I'm going to say. Is there an answer, or is it something that there isn't an answer to just yet? That's it.
So, look, I love what MEACT does very much. I did want to say I'm really surprised that we still don't include sort of mental health as part of it's just part of everyday work, really. I remember a friend of mine who's now running Channel 4 in the UK. I will come back to your question. But she's called Alex Mann at Channel 4. She's a good friend of mine. And I remember when we were students, and she said, was doing PhDs, and she went off to industry, and I stayed at university. And she went to a consulting firm, and I remember she came back, and I said, "So, how was it? How has it been going?" And she said, "Oh, it's amazing." She said, "There's a psychologist as part of the team, and they make sure that every week we are." All the recruits are, they're talking about how their week went, and it's like just like project management training. It was put in there as something that was equally as important. And we don't do that, and I don't know why. It's just really important. So thank you for the work that you do. I'm very happy to talk to you about space junk after the break. I can say it's a huge problem. It's always the problem isn't anywhere in space. Space is big, except for that shell around the Earth. But the problem is that if that becomes too congested, you can't make it through. You just can't access anything else. And once something's gone, it's really hard to do anything about it, really, because the velocities that you're talking about, the extent of the problem is really difficult. And it is sad because we know how this goes as a human race. We know what happens when we don't take the warning signs early. And when you've got big business looking down and caring about shareholders, I suppose. That being said, yes, so there's an international, so the United Nations Office of Outer Space is probably the international group driving regulatory change in the space sector. So how do you design things that work first time? What are the regulations about? Without slowing business down, but how do you just make sure you're not just launching plastic economy stuff, that's doing a lot of really amazing things. I think people in Europe and the US, definitely in Asia, where a lot of the debris is coming down over, it's started to come down already. The public are starting to get interested, right? And that's great. I think that's really important. The public now turning around going, why is there half a carbon fiber dragon capsule sticking out my farm? Like, what is this, And this is really important. And that's making the companies think twice. But there's not much regulation right now. You need to get up into space, and that's the problem. So how do you temper both these things to permit opportunities being delivered from a commercial sector, but at the same time not damaging our entire environment that we need to be passing on to our kids? But happy to talk more later. There's technology solutions and things as well. So,
My name's Victoria Roberts. I'm here with my lovely colleagues from Jobs and Skills Australia. My question was about the working in silos that you identified and bringing together voices from all these multidisciplinary teams. We're trying to do something similar in our project management office. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know, how smooth was that process of bringing people into the room? We have some silos that are very invested in getting everyone in the room, and we have some silos that quite enjoy being in a silo. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to know if you encounter any kind of resistance to that approach and how you brought people along for the ride, please.
Great question. So the way I approached it was I didn't need to bring everyone along. Whoever, there was a whole bunch of staff and researchers at ANU that really they should just be in a room working on Nobel Prizes or something. There's only people skills. Their skills are in coming up with something brilliant that will save cancer in 10 years or something. So this is all it's not quite like this, but you know what I mean. I didn't have to convince everyone, right? I just needed the same mindset people to put their hand up, I think. That was the first thing. So it was acknowledging that I didn't need to convince everyone. I just needed to be able to convince people like me who instantly saw the benefit of it. The second thing was that, when you start, it's good to have something to focus on. So the creation of the agency in 2018 had a knock-on effect to me saying to ANU, like large scale, look, there are opportunities here we can be going for, but not if we're siloed, right? So that intersection is what's powerful. Who are the beneficiaries of what we're doing all this for? And so there was a focus. So I think having that focus could just be a proposal, like one opportunity or one change you're trying to do organizationally. But I think people do work better when they've got just one thing to focus on as the opportunity. And so I was very careful to do that too. I was very careful to do that too. And then the third thing was just listening to everyone we did talk to, listening. I mean, it's a good negotiation strategy, but listening to their problems first. And again, I couldn't solve everyone's problems. But if I spoke to any dean, they'd been trying for years, for example, to get multidisciplinary stuff happening, and they didn't know what to do. So some they wanted me to be so successful for that way. Others wanted a different revenue stream. Others were just inspired, actually, that their College of Asia Pacific researchers were actually the beneficiaries of space when we're talking about really affecting individuals and humans, creating human stories. They were more valuable than anyone else. So it was a range of things, but I hope that, I think they were the broad things. I just want to say it's really wonderful to see this group of people here today. I celebrate everything that you do. I'm very happy to talk more on the break as well. Thank you.